The day Karen tried to evict me from my own dock started like any other calm water morning sun and me enjoying a cup of coffee while watching the lake shimmer. Then came the storm, not from the sky, but from the HOA president herself. Karen marched down in her oversized sun hat, clutching a folder thick with violation notices, barking orders like she owned the shoreline. She waved a paper in my face and shouted that I had 24 hours to vacate my dock or face heavy fines. My dock, the one I built with my own two hands. But what Karen didn't know, what made me smile through her tirade, was that in less than an hour the balance of power would flip. The woman who threatened to strip me of my peace would soon watch her most prized possession disappear right before her eyes. Because while she tried to take my dock, I was about to take her boat. My name's Jack. I'm 58 years old, semi-retired, and for the first time in decades, I thought I had finally found peace. After 35 years of working construction, saving every dime I could, and raising two kids who are now grown and living their own lives, I bought myself a lakeside home. It wasn't the fanciest place on the shore, but it was mine. Every nail, every board, every inch of that dock had my sweat in it. For me, the dock wasn't just a wooden platform stretching over water, it was freedom. It was the place I cast my fishing line at dawn, where I sipped coffee with the morning fog, where I taught my grandkids to tie knots and skip stones. If life had a front porch, that dock was mine. I thought neighbors would be the cherry on top. A small, picturesque community nestled around a crystal lake where everyone waved to each other on the road, where you could borrow a wrench without a second thought. But if there's one thing I didn't count on, it was the HOA. Or more specifically, Karen. Now, Karen wasn't the kind of person you could ignore. She made sure of that. Imagine a woman in her mid-40s, always overdressed for a lakeside walk, strutting around with a clipboard like it was a crown. She was the self-appointed queen of the HOA, and she wore that title with more arrogance than the mayor of any city I'd ever lived in. Her lipstick was as loud as her opinions, and her voice carried across the lake like a bullhorn. If you so much as painted your mailbox the wrong shade of white, Karen would know, and she'd have a violation letter in your mailbox before the paint dried. Her house, the biggest on the block, screamed money. The kind of sterile, magazine-perfect house no one ever actually enjoys living in. Out front sat her pride and joy, a gleaming, oversized boat, the sort that looked more suited for Miami than our little lake. She polished it like it was a crown jewel, paraded it around the water every weekend, and always managed to park it just a little too close to my dock. Sometimes I swear I'd hear the faint bump of fiberglass against my boards at night, like the boat was trying to pick a fight on her behalf. Before Karen turned her sights on me, life at the lake was peaceful. I had friends among the neighbors, old Bob next door who loved grilling, and the Martins, a retired couple who'd bring over pies from time to time. We'd chat about fishing spots, water levels, the weather. Nobody cared if your grass was an inch too long. Nobody except Karen. What made me a target, I suppose, was simple independence. Karen didn't like people who didn't bow to her authority. She liked being the center of control, and I wasn't the type to ask her permission for every little thing. When I built my dock, I did it with full permits from the county. I followed state regulations, double-checked the measurements, and even had an inspector sign off. But to Karen, none of that mattered. If it wasn't approved through her, it was, in her words, a violation of community standards. I could see it in her eyes that first time she mentioned it. That mix of disdain and challenge. Like she had found her new project, not fixing the potholes, not maintaining the community park, not dealing with her own violations, but breaking me. Here's the thing, though. I've worked on job sites tougher than any HOA meeting. I've dealt with clients who tried to stiff me on payments, bosses who yelled until their voices cracked, city inspectors who nitpicked over fractions of an inch. Compared to them, Karen was just another loudmouth with too much free time. The mistake she made was underestimating me. She saw a man with gray hair enjoying his dock, sipping his coffee, and she figured I'd roll over when she barked. But I've been standing my ground my whole life, and I wasn't about to let her or anyone take away what I built with my own hands. To me, the lake wasn't just water, it was peace. A hard-earned reward after decades of sweat and stress. Every evening, I'd sit at the edge of that dock, legs dangling over the water, listening to the frogs croak and the crickets sing. Sometimes my grandson would join me, asking about fishing knots or why the water looked gold when the sun set. Other times, it was just me and the stillness. That dock was my sanctuary, and that's why Karen's attack hit deeper than just paper violations. She wasn't just threatening wood and nails, she was trying to steal my peace. The funny part, most neighbors didn't even like Karen. Oh, they nodded politely, sure, but I could tell. The rolled eyes when she walked away, the muttered complaints about her endless notices, the way some folks avoided her altogether. But nobody wanted to be the one to stand up to her. She thrived on fear. And to be fair, she had a sharp tongue and a knack for manipulation. It was easier for most to stay quiet, pay the fines, trim the hedges, and avoid her wrath. But I wasn't wired that way. And deep down, I knew this was headed for a showdown. She was picking the wrong fight, and she didn't even realize it yet. You see, I've always believed bullies are the same at every age. Doesn't matter if it's the kids stealing lunch money at school, the foreman yelling on a job site, or the HOA president waving violation slips, they all thrive on control, and they all crumble the second someone refuses to bend. Karen thought she had the power. She thought her boat, her title, and her clipboard made her untouchable. But the truth, she was standing on rotting planks, and soon enough I was going to prove it. What started as a ridiculous letter about my dock was about to spiral into a full-blown war on the water. And as much as I hated conflict, I wasn't backing down. Not from Karen, not from anyone. Because if she thought she could take my dock, she had another thing coming. Let us know where you're watching from today. And if you're new here, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to join our growing community. The first official shot in this war didn't come from Karen's mouth, though she never wasted an opportunity to flap it. No, it arrived in the form of a neatly folded piece of paper shoved into my mailbox wrapped in a bright yellow envelope stamped with the HOA's ugly logo. I remember holding it in my hand, coffee steaming beside me, and already feeling my blood pressure tick up a notch. Nothing good ever came in envelopes that color. Inside was the notice, unauthorized structure dock, not in compliance with community standards. Must be removed within 30 days or fines will apply. Removed, I nearly spat out my coffee. That dock was built legally with county permits and inspections. I had the paperwork filed in a neat little folder inside my desk. Compliance wasn't the problem, control was. And I knew exactly whose fingerprints were on this. Karen's signature was scrawled at the bottom like a victory flag. HOA President. Bold letters. She might as well have signed it Her Royal Highness. I walked down to the dock that morning, letter in hand, staring at the planks like they were suddenly guilty of some crime. Sunlight glinted off the water and a couple of ducks waddled by as if mocking me. Unauthorized structure, I muttered. Tell that to the inspector who signed off on it last year. But I wasn't about to storm into Karen's yard waving paperwork. That's exactly what she wanted, for me to lose my cool to dance to her tune. Instead, I folded the letter back into the envelope, tucked it in my pocket, and decided to wait. Of course, Karen didn't wait long. By that afternoon, she came striding down in her oversized sun hat like she was about to host a parade. Her boat, polished within an inch of its life, bobbed smugly at the edge of her dock. She stopped right at the property line, hands on her hips. "Jack," she said with that condescending tilt of her head, "I trust you got my notice." I nodded. I did. "And you understand the seriousness of the violation," I almost laughed. "Karen, this dock is county approved. Signed, sealed, and stamped. If you've got a problem, you can take it up with the state." Her lips curled into that smile, the kind that says she thinks she's already won. "Oh, Jack, the HOA's standards are higher than the county's. We can't just have people throwing together projects. Property values are at stake." I glanced at her boat, easily worth more than most houses on the block. Yeah, I'd hate for the neighbors to lose sleep over my 2x4s. She ignored the jab, pulling a clipboard from under her arm like a sheriff unholstering a gun. "You have 30 days. After that, fines begin. And if you refuse, what I cut her off, you gonna drag it into the lake yourself?" Her smile never wavered. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Then she turned heels, clicking against the boards, and walked back up the path like she was marching off to war. That was the first spark, the moment I realized this wasn't about rules. It wasn't about docks, or wood, or permits. This was about Karen flexing her muscles, showing the neighborhood she was in charge, and picking me as her example. The days after the tension simmered. Each morning I'd walk down to the dock with my coffee, half expecting to find it spray-painted with violation in bright red. Karen would cruise past in her boat's sunglasses, reflecting the sun, waving like a queen to her subjects. Except when her eyes locked on mine, the wave always dropped. I tried diplomacy at first. I brought the folder of permits to the next HOA meeting, slid them across the table, and calmly explained that the dock was legal. Karen didn't even glance at the papers. She tapped her pen against the clipboard and said, "Legal doesn't always mean compliant with community standards." That's when I knew reason wasn't going to cut it. Karen wasn't interested in facts. She wanted obedience. She wanted me to bow, to nod, to thank her for gracing me with her attention. And that wasn't happening. What really got under my skin was the whispers. I could see her working the crowd, leaning in close to neighbors at the mailboxes, gesturing toward my house when she thought I wasn't looking. I knew the kind of poison she was spreading. Unsafe dock, lowering property values, Jack's not really following the rules, petty childish nonsense. But it planted seeds. Soon I'd catch neighbors giving me looks not unfriendly but cautious, as if I'd suddenly turned into the community troublemaker. The final straw came one evening when I went down to fish. Karen's boat was parked so close to my dock, I could have reached over and tapped the side with my pole. I tied on a lure, but when I cast the line tangled against her railings, I gave it a sharp tug and muttered under my breath, but I swear I could hear her laughter drifting across the water from her porch. That was the moment. The exact point where annoyance hardened into resolve. This wasn't just about a dock anymore. This was about standing up to a bully. Karen thought she could push me around with fancy titles and violation letters. She thought she could make me sweat with threats of fines. But she had no idea who she was dealing with. I've spent a lifetime standing firm against bigger storms than her. And if she wanted a fight, she was going to get one. The spark had been lit. And sparks, when ignored, turn into fires. If the first violation letter was Karen's warning shot, what came after was a full-blown artillery barrage. She didn't waste a single day. By the following week, my mailbox had turned into a dumping ground for HOA official correspondence. Monday, failure to maintain dock aesthetics. Tuesday, improper lawn edging. Wednesday, unapproved outdoor furniture. I swear by Thursday I was half expecting to find a letter accusing me of breathing too loudly near the lake. Each envelope had Karen's signature at the bottom, her smug little flourish like a dagger jabbed into my ribs. The fines started adding up $50. Here, $75 there, $100 for repeat offenses. I stacked the papers in a growing pile on my desk, wondering if Karen thought she could bury me under paperwork the way she buried her neighbors under rules. But here's the thing about a bully: when you don't flinch, they get meaner. Karen didn't stop at the letters. She weaponized her boat. That thing became her floating throne, circling the lake like a shark, always managing to accidentally block my dock. More than once I found myself standing at the edge, fishing rod in hand, with her boat tied so close I couldn't even launch my kayak without scraping against it. One Saturday morning I walked down to the water ready to cast a line, only to find her boat practically hugging my dock. I hollered up at her deck where she stood, sipping a mimosa. "Karen, you mind giving me a little space here?" She didn't even blink. Just raised her glass and called back. "It's a community lake, Jack. Don't like it. Take it up with the HOA. Her laughter echoed across the water like nails on a chalkboard. And she didn't stop there. A few days later, I saw a sheriff's cruiser parked by my driveway. My stomach dropped until the deputy explained that they'd received an anonymous tip about an unsafe dock. He did a quick inspection, walked across the planks, even bounced a little on them. Then he shrugged. "Jack, this dock's sturdier than most county bridges. Sorry to waste your time. Somebody's clearly got too much of their own." I didn't have to ask who somebody was. The neighborhood began to split into camps. Some folks whispered encouragement, quiet, "Hang in there," Jack comments when Karen wasn't around. Others avoided eye contact, clearly not wanting to get on her bad side. Then there were the handful she'd recruited her little court of loyal subjects, nodding along at meetings, parroting her lines about protecting property values. It was like living in a bad high school play, except the drama queen was in her 40s and armed with legal stationery. The tipping point came at the next HOA meeting. Karen strutted in with her clipboard clutched like a royal scepter. I sat quietly at the back, sipping coffee from a thermos, waiting to see what fresh nonsense she'd cooked up. She didn't disappoint. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, standing at the podium, "we cannot allow one homeowner's disregard for the rules to drag down our entire community. Mr. Jack's dock, while technically permitted by the county, fails to meet our HOA standards. It is unsafe, unsightly, and frankly a hazard to property values." I nearly choked on my coffee. Unsafe, unsightly. That dock was straighter than her eyeliner on a windy day. Karen pressed on, waving photos like evidence in a courtroom. "As president, I have no choice but to enforce our bylaws. Unless Mr. Jack removes the dock immediately, we will fine him daily and pursue legal action." I could feel the eyes of the room shift toward me. Some sympathetic, some curious, others just relieved they weren't the ones under fire. I stood calmly and walked to the front. "Karen, with all due respect, this dock was built legally. Here's the county permit signed and dated. The HOA doesn't override state law." Karen's smile widened. "The HOA adds to state law. We set higher standards, Jack. Standards you're failing to meet." The room murmured. She was good at this, twisting words, making herself sound like the voice of reason. I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. You're not protecting property values, Karen. You're protecting your ego. For the first time, I saw her smile falter, just for a flicker of a second. Then she straightened, tapped her pen against the clipboard, and declared, "Meeting adjourned." Neighbors shuffled out, whispering. I stayed behind, gathering my papers. Karen lingered at the doorway, her eyes sharp as daggers. "You have until the weekend, Jack," she hissed. "After that, I'll see to it myself." It wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration of war. That night, as I sat on my dock watching the sun sink below the horizon, I felt the weight of it all pressing down. Karen wasn't going to stop. She'd push and push until either I broke or she did. But here's the thing about me, I don't break easy. If Karen wanted a fight, she was about to get one. And she had no idea just how much fire she'd lit. The thing about people like Karen is that they never imagine anyone might be watching them as closely as they watch everyone else. She was too busy sniffing around my lawn, counting blades of grass, and measuring the angle of my dockboards to notice that her own castle was built on sand. It started with a hunch. After that HOA meeting where she practically foamed at the mouth, I went home and pulled out the bylaws binder. Every HOA has a fat stack of rules written in legalese designed to keep people in line. Most folks never read it. They just pay their dues, mow their lawns, and pray they don't end up on the Queen's bad side. But me, I had time, and I had motivation. I flipped through the sections on docks, boats, and shoreline use. The words blurred together at first, but then one sentence snagged me like a hook. All watercraft must be registered with the HOA and state authorities. Unauthorized storage or docking of unregistered vessels is prohibited. I blinked. Unregistered? Surely not. Karen, of all people, would never let her boat slip through a paperwork crack. She was the type who laminated grocery lists. Still, the thought nagged at me. So the next morning, I went down to the county clerk's office. It wasn't glamorous, just a beige room with buzzing lights and tired clerks shuffling papers. I handed over Karen's address and asked if her boat registration was on file. The clerk tapped at the computer, frowned, then shook her head. "No record under that name," she said. My eyebrows shot up. "You're sure?" She turned the monitor toward me. "Positive. If it's out there, it's not properly registered in this county." I walked out of that office with a grin so wide strangers probably thought I'd won the lottery. Because in a way I had. But I wasn't done. I went back to the HOA bylaws, flipping further. There it was again, dock extensions must be pre-approved by the board. I'd seen Karen's dock. It wasn't just extended, it was practically a pier, bigger than mine, with a little seating area she used for her weekend parties. I'd never once seen a board vote approving it in the meeting minutes. And I checked. I combed through every record from the last 5 years. Her name never came up, not once. It was almost too perfect. The cherry on top came from Bob, my neighbor. Bob was the quiet type, not one to stir the pot, but that night he shuffled up to me while I was tinkering with a fishing reel. "Jack," he said, voice low, "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Karen's been keeping her boat tied up on HOA property. That corner of the shoreline she uses belongs to the association, not her lot. Technically, it's against the rules." I nearly dropped the reel. "You're kidding." Bob shook his head. "Nope. She bullies everyone else so nobody says a word. But the bylaws are clear, you can't store personal property on HOA land." It was like watching dominoes fall. Each little piece of information clicked into place, building a bigger picture. Karen wasn't just guilty of hypocrisy. She was practically swimming in violations. Unregistered boat, unauthorized dock, illegal use of HOA property. The very things she accused me of, she was neck-deep in herself. For days I kept digging. I took photos of her dock extension complete with measurements, snapped pictures of her boat tied illegally, even recorded the times it blocked my access, bumping against my dock like a drunk neighbor at a barbecue. I cataloged everything, time-stamped and organized like I was preparing a case for court, and the more evidence I gathered, the calmer I felt. Karen's power over me had always been about intimidation. Her weapon was fear. But now I wasn't afraid. I was holding the bigger stick. I remember one afternoon vividly. I was sitting on my dock binder of evidence beside me when Karen strutted past in her usual uniform, oversized sunglasses, lips painted fire engine red, clipboard in hand. She smirked, tossed her hair, and called out, "Enjoy your dock while you can," Jack clocks ticking. I just smiled back, raised my coffee, and said, "Hope your boat's registered, Karen." The look on her face, just a flicker, a tiny crack in her armor, was priceless. She recovered fast, of course, firing back, "Don't you worry about my boat." Then she turned sharply and marched away, heels digging into the dirt. But I saw it, that little twitch. That tiny moment where the queen realized her crown might be slipping. That night I sat on my porch flipping through the evidence one last time. For weeks, she'd had me playing defense, dodging fines, and fending off accusations. But now the tide was turning. I wasn't just defending my dock anymore. I was preparing to strike. Because Karen's empire wasn't built on solid ground. It was built on rotting wood and missing paperwork. And I was about to kick the first board loose. If I had been feeling a little too proud of myself for uncovering Karen's mess, she was quick to remind me she wasn't about to roll over and let me win. No, Karen doubled down. Bullies always do when they sense control slipping away. It started with a final notice letter. This one wasn't just slipped into my mailbox, it was hand-delivered, shoved right between the boards of my front porch. In big, bold letters across the top, "Final notice of eviction of dock structure. Eviction." Like my dock was a squatter hiding out on the shoreline. The letter demanded immediate removal, no grace period. It claimed fines would accrue daily until complete compliance is achieved. At the bottom, there was Karen's signature again, except this time she'd added, "Enforcement pending." She wanted me to believe she had the authority of a judge, jury, and sheriff rolled into one. I laughed out loud when I read it, but still something about the word eviction stuck in my chest. She wasn't just going after wood and nails anymore. She wanted to scare me into thinking I could actually lose the home I'd built for myself. The next blow came in the form of a surprise HOA meeting. Karen posted flyers on every mailbox in the neighborhood, emergency session addressing non-compliance threats to property values. Everyone knew what that meant. It wasn't about threats. It was about me. I showed up early, binder of evidence tucked under my arm, and sat near the back. The room was already buzzing. Neighbors whispered in little clusters, some glancing my way, others avoiding eye contact. I could practically feel the electricity of gossip in the air. Karen marched in like a general inspecting her troops. She wore a red blazer this time, the kind of color that screams authority or desperation. Clipboard in hand, she strode to the front and cleared her throat. "Thank you everyone for coming on such short notice," she began, her voice smooth and commanding. "We are here tonight to address a serious and ongoing violation that threatens the integrity of our community. One homeowner has repeatedly disregarded our rules, undermined our standards, and placed our property values in jeopardy." Every head turned toward me. Karen basked in it. She went on waving photographs of my dock like she was prosecuting a case in front of the Supreme Court. Unsafe construction, unauthorized additions, non-compliant materials. This dock is not only a hazard but a disgrace to the reputation of our neighborhood. I clenched my jaw, but I didn't rise. Not yet. Let her dig deeper. Karen leaned forward, eyes glittering. "We cannot let this stand. If we allow one person to flout the rules, we open the door to chaos. Today it's a dock. Tomorrow it could be chain link fences, broken down cars, wild parties. Is that what you want for our community?" A few of her loyalists clapped, nodding eagerly. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Finally, Karen slammed the papers down. "Therefore, I propose we authorize immediate legal action to force removal of this dock." Enough is enough. The room erupted. Some neighbors murmured agreement, others protested. Old Bob spoke up from the back. "Karen, that dock's sturdier than most bridges around here." "Jack's done nothing wrong." Karen cut him off with a sharp glare. "This isn't about one dock, Bob. It's about order. Without rules, we have nothing." That was my cue. I rose slowly, carrying my binder to the front. "Funny you should mention rules, Karen," I said, voice calm, "because I've been reading them. Very carefully." Karen's smile twitched, but she kept her tone syrupy. "Jack, this isn't your time to speak." I held up a hand. "No, I think it is." The room quieted. I opened the binder, flipping through neatly tabbed pages. "See, the bylaws say all watercraft must be registered with both the HOA and the county. But your boat, Karen, doesn't seem to be on record." I checked. A ripple of gasps spread through the room. Karen's face froze. I continued, "And about dock extensions, the bylaws require board approval. Funny thing, I went through every minute from the past 5 years. No record of yours ever being approved. Not once." Karen's cheeks flushed red to match her blazer. "That's irrelevant. We're not here to discuss my dock," I smiled. "Oh, but we are. Because the rules apply to everyone, don't they? Or is it one set for you and another for the rest of us?" The room buzzed, neighbors whispering fiercely now. Some of the same people who had clapped for her earlier were leaning forward, eyes wide. Karen tried to recover her voice, rising. Don't be fooled, this is a distraction. The issue here is Jack's dock. I leaned in, lowering my voice just enough to make her lean closer. No, Karen. The issue here is your hypocrisy. And I'm not the only one who's noticed. For the first time since I'd known her, Karen looked rattled. Her confidence cracked her eyes, darting like a cornered animal. But still, she tried to strike back. You think you can outmaneuver me, Jack? I've been president of this HOA for 6 years. I've handled lawsuits, complaints, disputes. You're just one man with a pile of papers. You won't win. I closed the binder gently. Maybe. Or maybe I've been building more than a dock this whole time. The meeting ended in chaos. Neighbors' divided voices raised. Karen storming out with her clipboard clutched like a lifeline. But as I walked back home under the cool night sky, I knew something had shifted. Karen wasn't invincible anymore. She knew it, and I knew it. And while she'd thrown her hardest punch yet, she had no idea the knockout was already coming. The night of that chaotic